Okay, we now move on to the final Q&A session of the night.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank Mr. Gur for his speech and for the invitation of his party to go to the conference in Ahmed last year, which was for me a very enlightening experience. I want to just comment on one little thing. I mean, all the points that you have been developing are very interesting indeed, and have already existed within the socialist tradition in the works of Otto Bauer and Karl Brenner, and the model of national cultural autonomy, which I have been arguing for quite a long time, is very relevant to the present situation in the Turkish state. First of all, the addition to that argument has to be that the Turkish state has to be defined as a multinational state, a state that composes a large number of nationalities, of which the Kurds are just one of them, the Turks are another, and there are several others, and we all know very well who they are. And at the same time, it is also important, I think, to understand, everybody has to understand that Mr. Öcalan is the historical leader of the Kurdish movement, and he has a very important role to play. At the same time, I was extremely impressed by the sophistication and political ability of the members of Mr. Gül's party, the BDP, and I think it is necessary to perhaps also move in time a little bit and allow the BDP to take initiatives and to be part of the important discussion. In this context, I think one of the elements that is missing, first of all, is perhaps in all this process of changing, perhaps the PKK has to change its name. And at the same time, it is necessary to have a situation in which, given that all the various openings that are being made possible, and also taking into account the very severe repression that many of your activists are suffering, it is very important at this stage to realize that the armed struggle is no longer the road to, and this has to be said very clearly and loudly. In other words, I think that allowing Mr. Gül's party, the BDP, to take a more active role, and also allowing a little bit more of a clear expression of the idea that the armed struggle now belongs to the past, and that the kind of perhaps recognizing the figure of Mr. Öcalan as a very important historical leader, but at the same time recognizing that there is a younger generation that are leaders of the BDP. Many of them are very active and very sophisticated women who can take the leadership forward and represent the people. And perhaps the whole model that you present, which I full-heartedly support, I spent half of my academic life working on that particular model, it's a model that it is very viable not only for Turkey, but also for other parts of the world. And I think that you can draw a little bit of inspiration from the peace process in Northern Ireland, how models of non-territorial autonomy work in terms of creating recognition among people. So perhaps this is a new phase in the history of the Kurdish people, a very exciting one, and one that has to, first and foremost, recognize the role of the previous generation, but also allow the younger generation to take a more active role, and also in the present context in which there is an alternative to the Kemalist regime that had oppressed you for so many years. Allow a kind of a constructive discussion with the AKP, and to see how using certain forms of terminology, for example, your term autonomy, it exists in a kind of a Middle Eastern tradition. The Ottoman Empire was known for the millet system. Why not the millet system cannot be transform in that kind of autonomy that you so much want. Of course, the Millet system was a religious institution, but it need not be so if you transform it and if you move it on into a different kind of arrangement. It's important that in this time when people are talking so much about North Korea, that we make sure that nobody thinks that there is a kind of a cult of personality, and that it is necessary time and time again to recognize that the role of not only Mr. Öcalan, who has been a very important historical leader, but also to the role of the BDP and its members in trying to promote the discussion and advancing very important ideas in terms of the very important constitutional reform that's taking place in Turkey. Thank you very much.
I've read about the Oslo process, but I wonder what is the relation between the Oslo process, which failed, or did it not fail and did it actually pave the way for the current negotiation? Is there a relation between that? And furthermore, you have discussed the role of the BDP within the current negotiations. I asked this question this morning as well. Shouldn't there be more organizations included in the negotiations apart from the PKK and the government? What about civil society? What about other political parties? How can we have a sustainable peace for the Kurdish region if it's only the PKK and the state? Because with only the fighting parties, I'm not sure if there can be a sustainable peace. But I'm curious about your opinion.
Okay, unfortunately I get carried away, although I say that I'm not going to speak about the question. I think we Kurds have not really said enough about the question, that's why we keep on going back to the definition of the question still. So unfortunately there were many more slides, especially linking the Oslo process to the current peace process, and linking in fact the Oslo process to the roadmap. Which, as I said, you have the English book of the roadmap just outside. So there, of course, he doesn't just give a solution to the Kurdish question. He describes the problem of Turkey, first of all. You know, in what kind of a problematic period did Turkey turn into Turkey from Ottoman Empire? You know, like the Jacobinism that our friend talked about in the other sessions, and how that influenced the establishment of Turkey. Although it called itself a republic, it was more a nation state, not a republic. So it never became a republic, really, not yet. And so in there he goes in depth into the problem of Kurds, other ethnicities, as well as religious groups being excluded from the system. You know, the leftists and everybody else. And everybody tried to be put into one melting pot. So he goes through historical, philosophical, political questions in the establishment of Turkey, which has greater implications to the world, not just to Turkey or to the Middle East in general. You know, this is the problems that everybody is facing. But the Kurds made this, fortunately, more seeable. So with the Oslo process, the state, through the advisor of Erdogan, Mr. Erdogan, requested Öcalan to write down his project. And that project is the roadmap. But unfortunately, just as this roadmap was written and handed in to the government, to the state, the KCK operations at the same time began. And this is where the state and the government, we take it as one because the government became the state now. You know, they won over all the institutions now. So those excluded now became the ones in power. But anyway, and so there was a protocol which was published in the newspaper Bir Gün in May back then. And there it outlined what we are going through now, in fact. That there will be two people going from the organization, which is the BDP. I mean, we don't know what organization they agreed on, but we can now see that it's the BDP. So, I mean, you know, and also in the roadmap, you have several phases, 3 phases of how this is done. And there he also outlines, if there is no solution, which he's open to discuss, the roadmap he's also open to discuss with the Turkish party. But if there is no solution, there can either be annihilation on the one hand, or a nation-state door opening for the Kurds on the other hand, because, of course, the KJK solution is also one solution that the Kurds will insist on, but there is also within the Kurds a parallel struggle for nation state as well. Let us not forget this. I mean, there are two parallel struggles as well. So I want to say a few more things to our professor. I don't know, I see that there is so much of a strong underlining from Europe that Kurds should really do away with Öcalan. We're not really happy with this. And the reason for this is that every people has the right to elect their own leader. I mean, you know, the Kurds are not really meddling in with the business of, you know, like why is Merkel, for example, elected, you know. And so, I mean, it's unfortunate that still the outlook to Öcalan is a leader that should be left behind. Like, you know, when we see that Nelson Mandela is, I mean, he's now trying to be portrayed as a dove, but he was the person who began the armed struggle. He, in fact, constructed the organization for it. No, not just the ANC, but the armed wing within the ANC. So what I'm trying to say here is that there is room for everybody. And the project that I try to outline here indeed calls on everyone to come and struggle so that things can change for everybody. We're not talking about a regime change for the Kurds only. We're talking about a regime change for the women. We're talking about a regime change for all the other ethnic identities. We're talking about a change in the definition of identities, in the definition of what a nation is, and all of this, you know. And so we're saying, come, let's restructure this together. Kurdish people are trying, you know, in Ahmed, in Van, in Hakkari, there are some communes. But the thing is, I mean, with the KCK trials, these have all been stamped out. And there are thousands of people who were the local leaders, you know, who are in prison now because the state said they were trying to establish a parallel state. No, there was a local governance being established there, you know, so that Kurds can decide locally with others who live there, and everybody can organize on their own as women assemblies, as youth assemblies, as other ethnic groups. Yeah, so that they can redecide, restructure how they can live together. But yeah, without further ado, I think maybe I'll give to Nazmi.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the role of leaders for this kind of conflict resolutions are very important. So, Mr. Öcalan is the leader that need for this process too. I remember when people collecting this 3.5 million signature, they work day and the night, and this 3.5 million signatures are in the Turkish parliament now. They officially submit to the parliament that Öcalan, we recognize Öcalan as a leader, and he is going to represent us, whatever Turkish state doing with him. In this peace process, it's true that Mr. Öcalan has made a decision, but with the support of full support of his organization, full support of his people, and full support of BDP. These three institutions, including Kurdish people, are behind Mr. Öcalan. Of course, Mr. Öcalan is not going to talk everything with the state within this way. He must be free. And convicted leader, jail leader, could not go further during this negotiation. So his isolation situation must really be changed, and soon he has to be released in order to achieve a real peace between Turks and Kurds. The role of BDP is very important too, because we are in a parliament, we have a group, And we know that through this group we participate preparing for a new constitution, and we are also ready to sit with AKP to talk about legal framework, to prepare a legal framework to Kurdish question. Otherwise, we cannot discuss. We cannot discuss freely. We know that this kind of process are so sensitive. If the process is down, which was down 3 times in this country until the Good Friday Agreement, this could be down, but the Kurds will not be responsible for the downing of the whole process. We are ready to talk to government, but up to now we couldn't meet officially with AKP. Even we are in parliament. Of course, every day we met each other, but AKP and BDP didn't sit together and talk about the whole issue. I hope we will make this in the second step. The third step, of course, is a step of normalization, participation of all PKK or all other peoples in exile to democratic life in Turkey. So BDP is going to discuss with the government with the government on constitution, new constitution, and as well as a political solution. But the rest of Kurdish issue, must be negotiated with Mr. Öcalan as well as PKK. For example, disarmament, decommissioning of arms of PKK. We could not do. We can help, of course. We can moderate. We can support this idea. But BDP is not an armed organization, so we don't have arm. So Turkey need to go to PKK and talk to PKK about this issue specifically. So peace process whole must be discussed in that way. Otherwise, there will be no solution. And Turkey, we all going to spend time and we're going to spend efforts for nothing. But I must say that I'm very optimistic, and the BDP is very optimistic, and we work a lot, and we spend lots of effort to achieve a peaceful solution to Kurdish question. As Mr. Öcalan mentioned and underlined in Diyarbakir during the Newroz celebration, he said that this is not the end, but this is a beginning of a new process. It's a new life, which means we stop armed struggle, and we withdraw from Turkey, but that not means that we're giving up everything. We're giving up about all our demands. It's a new struggle that has just started. This is a start for a new struggle, a democratic struggle, a peaceful struggle, a political struggle for all Kurds. So the rate of support of this idea is very high in Kurdish region. What is the wise man is doing now, mainly speaking with the Turkish public opinion to encourage them to give more support to the peaceful process, this peace process. I'm sure that majority of the Turkish public opinion, maybe 60% of the population, give support to this new peaceful process. And within concrete steps, I guess there will be more support. We need confidence-building measures. Both sides should have taken concrete step towards the peace, but Turkish government must do more. And here also the European Union has role to support this peaceful process and must encourage Turkish government to go further and to take necessary steps.